Hello, second graders. Welcome to a new week. Just a little disclaimer, I'm sorry about any extra noise that you hear while watching this video. My computer isn't the most quiet. But anyway, let's move on. Let's try to make the best of it. So this week, we're going to focus on measuring. And today, more specifically, we're going to look at the different measuring tools and the units of measurement used on these tools, okay? There's a lot of different ways to measure. We can measure the temperature outside, the volume of how full something is. But today, in this week, we're specifically going to work on measuring the length of object, how high, how tall, how wide, all of the fun stuff. All right, so let's get started. All right, so the first tool that we're going to look at today is the ruler. And I don't know how many of you have ever worked with a ruler before. If you haven't, that's okay, because this week you're going to get a lot of practice with it, okay? And if you have, awesome, you're already ahead of the game. So when looking at the ruler here, I provided a full length image as well as a close-up image, okay? So this first one right here is my full length. So as you can see here, one side of the ruler has the inches, and then if I flipped it over, you can see that the other side is in centimeters, all right? And those are the units of measurement used on the ruler, okay? So we have inches, also represented as IN, or we have centimeters, represented as CM, okay? And when further looking at the ruler, we can see there are 12 inches on a ruler, okay? Or 30 centimeters. So we can see that, and we're going to find out later, that 12 inches equals 1 foot. It's about this long, okay? All right. And then when looking at the close-up image, you can see here that this is the centimeters side and this is the inches side. Just by looking at it, what differences do you see from centimeters to inches? Maybe take some notes on what do you think is different? I know just looking at it from observation, I could see that 1 inch is a lot bigger than 1 centimeter, right? Or maybe I noticed that there are a bunch of little tick marks in between each of the centimeters, right? And then there's some down here too with the inches. What do you think those mean? Well, stay tuned and we'll find out today. Okay, let's move on. All right, so still on the ruler, right? So when using a ruler, what kind of objects, what do we use rulers for, right? So rulers are most commonly used for measuring small objects. All right, you can see in this picture in the example, this person is measuring the length of his pen, and it's small enough to be able to be measured by a ruler, okay? So what other objects can you think of that could be measured by a ruler that are small enough to be measured by a ruler? Are there any other ways that you use a ruler? Maybe not for measuring, but maybe for drawing a straight line or drawing or tracing. Let me know. All right, let's move on to our next tool. Alrighty, so the next tool that we're going to be looking at is the meter stick. And the units of measurement often used on a meter stick is in millimeters, also represented as 2 small m's, or centimeters, again, which we know is cm. Even though these are the two most common units used on a meter stick, you can also use inches as well. So I provided 2 examples. The customary version, or the customary side of the meter stick, shows the, the units of measurement in inches here. So you can see that it goes all the way to about 37, 38 inches, okay? And we know that the ruler goes only to 12, so the ruler would end about here. So we can tell already that the meter stick's a lot bigger than a ruler, all right? But meter sticks are more often used in the metric system, or the metric side here. So I provided an example of that as well. And you can see that it takes about 100 millimeters to make 1 meter stick, right? So you can see here that this is the metric version of the meter stick. This is the customary version. Customary is inches and feet. Metric is millimeters and centimeters and meters. All right. And then I provided a close-up version too. So you can see right here. You can see the inches looks a lot like the ruler that we looked at in the previous slides. And then here on the metric, you can see here that 10 millimeters is equal to 1 centimeter. Alrighty. So There we go. Let's move on. Okay, so still on the meter stick, how most people use the meter stick is to measure objects that are larger than a piece of paper. All right, so you can see here in the example that this little boy is measuring the length of his arm with a meter stick. All right, because it's big enough to do that. Whereas a ruler, you could use a ruler, but it might be a little more difficult. You might have to do it a couple times to figure out what the full length of your arm is. All right, so can you think of anything else that you could measure a meter stick with? Okay, let's move on to our next tool. All right, so this one is one of my favorites. Is the yardstick is our next tool. So the yardstick, I like to think of it as basically a really, really big ruler that goes up to about 36 inches, okay? And if we break down the yardstick, you can see here, remember that we know that 12 inches is usually how long a ruler is, and 12 inches equals what? 1 foot. Remember we talked about that, which can be represented as FT. All right. And here we can see that here's 12 here, oh, right here. So that's about the size of the ruler. If we go up another 12, right? 12 plus 12 is to 24. That would be 2 whole feet or 24 inches. And then if we go up another 12, if we add another 12 to 24, we get 36, and that's a whole nother foot. So altogether we have what? We have 1, 2, 3 feet are in 1 yardstick, okay? And if you look at the up close version I provided here, you can see again, it's a lot like a ruler. Again, you can see these tick marks again. You saw that in the previous examples too. So what do you think that is? What do you think these lines represent? How many are in between each inch? Again, stay tuned and we'll figure it out later. All right, let's move on. All right, so when I'm thinking of the yardstick, you're like, all right, so how do we use a big yardstick? What do people often use a yardstick for? So it's most commonly used for measuring lengths up to 3 feet, right? Because we found that out. There's 3 feet in 1 yard. 3 feet in 1 yard. So a yardstick is basically, like I said, a long version of a ruler. And you can see here in the example that this guy looks like he's measuring the dimensions, the sides of maybe an object that he's trying to build or cut out of this piece of plywood or plastic that he has there. All right, can you think of any other reasons you might use a yardstick? All right, let's move on to our last tool. Okay, so our last tool, and my actual personal favorite, I like the yardstick, but I love the tape measure, is, okay, I gave it away, the tape measure. All right, the units that are used in a tape measure are meters, represented as 1 m, or centimeters, which we know was cm, feet as ft, or inches as in. All right, so it can use almost all the units that we've talked about so far in just one tape measure. But that, again, depends on the type of tape measure you have or you get, okay? Miss Taylor actually brought her tape measure today. I got mine as a graduation gift from my high school woodshop teacher, which kind of tells you how, like, who does tape measures benefit? People who build stuff, who work with wood or cut things. This was a very useful tool in my class, and I'm very grateful that he gave me my very own. All right, so getting back to the tape measure, we can see here that this one is representing the inches more so than meters or centimeters, right? And you can see here that it, unlike a lot of other ones, it represents the different foot and how like 1 foot is equal to 12 inches, right? And we know that, but it's nice to have an actual visual to let us know. And then you can see here that this is what the inches are, as well as it kind of labels these small little tick lines that we've been talking about this entire lesson. You can see that this one is 1/16, 1/8, 1/4. This is half, right? It's like a halfway point between 13 and 14. So here's kind of just a sneak peek of what we're going to talk about here soon and what these tick marks mean. All right? All right, we're almost there. Alrighty, and like I kind of said earlier about taking woodshop and how tape measures benefit those who build things, tape measures are most commonly used for measuring the size of objects of like the distance between two objects, or how a lot of like what most measuring tools are used is to measure length. That is what a tape measure does. But more specifically, the distance between two objects. You can see here in this example, this person's measuring the width of this door frame right here. Maybe they're trying to figure out how wide their door needs to be able to fit within this small frame. Right? So again, this is a very beneficial tool to builders for sure. All right, let's move on. Alrighty, class, we're almost there. So before we move on to talking about those small little tick marks, I just kind of wanted to go over real quick again the units of measurement used in measuring length, and the ones that we're mostly going to look at this week. So remember when we talked about the customary side of the meter stick, is that's also called customary length, and the units of measurement that are used in customarily are inches, feet, and yards. Okay, and remember we learned that there are 12 inches in 1 foot. And then we figured out from the yardstick that there's 3 feet in 1 yard. All right, and then we also have the metric length or the metric system, and that was often seen on the meter stick as well, where we saw that 10 millimeters was equal to 1 centimeter. And then we also found out that there are 100 centimeters in 1 meter, right? There are 100 centimeters in 1 meter, which is why it's called the meter stick. All right. So just a quick review on the units of measurement. They're important to know. Let's move on. All right, class, it's the moment we've all been waiting for. We're learning what these small little tick marks mean. So here I provided a super blown up image of these small tick marks, okay? So this distance between 0 and 1 is 1 inch, all right? Obviously an inch in real life is smaller than that, but this is just a blown up version so we can kind of see what these lines mean, okay? So if we're breaking it down, we can see that there are a total, between 0 and 1, there's a total of 16 lines, okay? And from that, we figure out it's broken up into 16ths, these lines. They're equally spread apart into 16ths. All right, so we're going back to fractions, okay? Knowing our fractions is an important part of measuring, okay? So let's go through it. So we see here, this very first tick mark, it's 1/16 of an inch, okay? If we move on, this would be 2/16 of an inch, but this here in this picture, they simplified it to an eighth, okay? Because if you round down, simplify it, 2/16, if you divide each by 2, goes to 1/8. But if you left it as 2/16, that's totally okay, okay? They're the same thing. And then if you just keep going, you see that there's a pattern, right? There's 3/16. This would be 4/16, but again, it simplifies down to a fourth of an inch. Okay, and you can see here that this line right here, the longer line, not quite the half, right? But the longer one, right in between the half and 0, is 1/4 of an inch. Okay, and that's how you start to kind of recognize that. Okay, you don't always have to go 1/16, 1, 2, 3/16, 4/16. You can realize this line was the longer one, so it's a 1/4 of an inch. Okay. And then if you come all the way over here, you'll realize the longest line in between 0 and 1 is half an inch. And if you go again to the next almost longer line, you'll see that's 3/4 of an inch. Okay. And then you'll eventually get to 1. So again, this is the giant inch. These are what each tick or line represents to get to an inch, what an inch is made up of. Okay. So maybe you need to rewatch this section again, just really take some time, pause the video maybe to really just look at this image to be able to understand what each tick mark means, okay? So let's move on to the metric. So this is the customary length. Let's move to the metric length. Alrighty, so here we're breaking it back down into the centimeters or millimeters, okay? So we remember that there are 10 millimeters in 1 centimeters. And rather than using fractions in the metric length, they just go off of um, basically tenths. Okay, so right here, if you just count 10 lines, you'll get to 1 centimeter. Okay, so 10 lines per centimeter. This blue line is the halfway point, right, or 0.5 of a centimeter, or 5/10 of a centimeter. In there, it would be a half centimeter. And then maybe if you went 5 more, you get 1 1/2 centimeter, right? It's a little easier than the inch if you look at it this way. All right. So those are the small tick lines and what each little tick mark means in both inches and centimeters. And we'll be working with that a lot this week. So just really make sure you understand that. Let's move on. All right, so now that we know what tools to use, how to read these tools, we're now going to look at how to measure an object and what we do when measuring an object to get the best and most accurate measurement, okay? So I've provided you 3 tips or 3 steps when it comes to measuring objects. The first one is to start at 0. Make sure to place the top of the object you're measuring at 0, all right? You don't want to put it in the middle of the ruler. You don't want to put it not on the ruler at all. You want to make sure you start the top or wherever you want to begin measuring your object at 0 to get your best, most accurate measurement. The second step is to make sure your object or whatever you're measuring is freaky flat, okay? I know not all objects are going to be straight as a line, but want to make sure that it's flat against the ruler and straight against the measurement tool so that you can get the most accurate measurement. You don't want it slanted or you don't want it diagonal because that's not going to be accurate to what its actual measurement is. Okay? And then the last step is to stop, look no further. All right? So wherever your object length ends, look at the measurement marking, all those little small lines that we talked about, and that is the exact length of your object, okay? So let's get some practice and see what this looks like, okay? All right, so let's practice. So here I have for us 2 different objects. We're going to measure both in inches and centimeters. All right, so first we're going to measure this pencil in inches. So we're going to drag it all the way to the end because the end is what represents 0 on this ruler, all right? Some rulers will provide a 0 section for you, but this one doesn't, so it is the end of the ruler. All right, so now that we put it starting at 0, right, that's step 1, we're going to make sure it's freaky flat. If I want, I can just bring it right up to a ruler to make sure it's freaky flat. And then I'm going to follow it all the way down to its very end. Then I'm going to stop, look no further, and I can see that it's exactly 5.5 inches, right? And remember, this would be 5 1/4. This is 5.5. This would be 5 3/4. Okay, so here we see that it is 5.5 inches exact. All right, so if we go down to the paper clip, we're going to do the same exact thing. Here on this ruler, it has a 0 labeled for us, a 0 line. So we're going to start it at that line. Okay, make sure it's right up against that. And then again, we're going to go start at 0, just like we did. And then we're going to follow it all the way down to the very end. And again, it doesn't quite end here. It ends right about there. And if we follow that down, we're going to stop, look no further, and see that is a 5.5 centimeters. All right. So that's how you measure different smaller objects with a ruler using inches and centimeters. All right. So let's move on and talk about what I have for you this week. Alrighty. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's lesson. I just have a couple of things for you to do today for me. And I'm sorry this was a little longer video, but introducing the topic is definitely the most stuff you're going to know for this week. The other videos aren't going to be as long. But thank you for hanging in with me today. The rest of today, I want you to watch Measuring Tools. I provided a link on Google Classroom. This is basically just giving you a quick review of what we talked about today, just to hopefully clear up any any confusion or questions you have. But if you do have any questions, feel free to email me um, using the email I provided in Google Classroom. The second thing I want you to do today is to complete the What's My Length activity I provided on Google Classroom for today. And you'll complete it in Google Forms. All right, so just submit that, make sure you answer every question. And then number 3, you're gonna, this is optional. I provided this for you as well to participate in the extra practice games I provided online. They're super fun, especially the ones on Splash Learn. Make sure to watch the tutorial on how to use Splash Learn if that's what you want to do. But please, please, please use these resources. They're super good and fun. And then the last thing, I just make sure to tune in for tomorrow to continue learning why measuring is fun, because it is so fun. All right, thank you, second graders. Have a great rest of your day, and I hope you get everything done that you need to get done. All right, God bless. Bye.